Hello and welcome to Allergies with Aya, a podcast all about food allergies and related food hypersensitivities. Growing up with food allergies, being a food allergy awareness advocate, studying and researching food allergies, and now working in the food hypersensitivity regulation field, and getting to interact with world-leading researchers and experts, I have developed a passion for understanding all aspects of food allergy and other food hypersensitivities. In this podcast, we will be taking a closer look at the science behind food hypersensitivity and dissect some of the misinformation we often read or hear about. We will also hear stories from people with lived experience. My aim is to create a scientifically curious community and to get you interested in the science behind food allergies and other food hypersensitivities. Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 6. In today's episode I'm joined by Sonia, and she has a lot of experience actually dealing with food hypersensitivity through things like personal experience and family. So Sonia, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about how we kind of know each other first?
Hi everyone, my name's Sonia. So me and Aya met in year 7 at school, and we hit it off and we were friends ever since. And I guess one of the things we shared in common was dealing with allergies from being 11 to now.
Yeah, I mean, what's your experience been like a little bit with food hypersensitivity? I know you've got lactose intolerance.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with lactose intolerance. I must have been about 10, something like that, 9 or 10. So I have that, and then my older brother has a nut allergy from birth, so we've always dealt with that. And he's got loads of allergies to loads of other things: asthma, hay fever, dust mite, all of those things. And then my mum worked as an allergy nurse specialist, so she used to do that in the hospital. So I've kind of grown up with dealing with allergies and also knowing what the science is behind it and all of that from my mum. So that's been helpful but a bit stressful at times.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And you're working as a pharmacist now as well.
Yeah.
Do you deal with allergies?
Yeah, actually, to be fair, one of the first things we do when we speak to a patient is we always ask about allergies, always ask, do you have any allergies? If so, what is the reaction that you get from them? And because I've grown up around people with allergies, I just know how severe it can be, and I always make sure I ask. You just never know, and some people don't know that they're reacting to something, or they don't know what type of reaction they're getting, so it's always important to ask, even in my day-to-day job.
In terms of kind of the conversation, it's really going to reflect our experiences having food hypersensitivities, and it's not really intended to be used as medical advice. So please, if you have any kind of worries or concerns, if you have a food hypersensitivity or if you have an intolerance or an allergy, please go talk to whoever your healthcare provider. We're just here to have a general chat about our experiences. Let's start with your family. So what was it like really growing up having an older brother who has nut allergies? I'm guessing you had to learn from a very kind of early age how to deal with them. And
because I'm the youngest, I don't know anything else. I've literally just known no nuts in the house, none of this. You can't even take a risk. You can't open, a packet of nuts because the smell gets everywhere. So it's been embedded in me since birth. It's things like when you go to a restaurant, we always have to consider where we're going, what type of food it is. We'll never go to a Chinese restaurant or a Japanese restaurant or Asian restaurants in general, just because of, they use a lot of nuts. And even then it's difficult because I feel like brands don't understand what allergy is a lot of the time, and you'll say, oh, brother's got an allergy, but they'll just say, oh, it might have nuts in, or the oil might have nuts in, and it's but you can't take that risk when it's that serious. So we're always super protective. I think that's what it is. From day one we've just been there's no point taking a risk, just be safe, eat where you can, eat where you know, and don't risk it. Being Indian, a lot of our food has nuts in. So when we go to weddings, when we go to events, we always have to be so careful not to touch something and then touch my brother.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I relate quite a lot actually. Coming from kind of an Arab background, a lot of our weddings include things like nuts.
Yeah.
And actually, I had to turn down an invitation quite recently because I didn't want to go to somewhere where I knew my face is going to swell and my eyes are going to get all itchy and red, and I just couldn't deal with that.
Also, I think culturally, a lot of people don't understand allergy, especially like in the older generations. I'm not trying to generalise, but in general, they don't always understand it, and they'll just be like, oh, just have some. But it's not a case of trying it. I think the whole point is you can't try it because you'll get a reaction, or you might get a reaction, and then there's no going back from that once it's started, really, unless you catch it in time. So I think it's about understanding as well, and I think that's where there's a problem, that people don't actually understand what it is. That's a problem we've had a lot growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. I've been to a lot of family friends' houses, and they've been like, when I was younger especially, and they didn't really understand what food allergies were.
Yeah.
They'd ask me, oh, try it. I'm like, no, I can't try it.
Yeah.
I'll react.
And they think that you're being rude then, or like you're trying to avoid it, but it's not that. It's you physically can't do it because your body won't let you.
No.
So trying to explain that, I think my brother does find it. I think sometimes he finds it can be difficult going out because he wants to have fun and he wants to enjoy himself, but then there's always that thought in the back of your mind of like, oh, can I actually eat that? Can I drink that? Even drinks have nuts in, and people just don't realise it, so you just have to be on top of it, I think, all the time. Make sure you're carrying your medicines. That's one thing we'd always remind him, I think, when we were growing up, like when he was a teenager or a bit younger, we'd be like, do you have your EpiPen kit? Do you have it all? He had like a bag with all his medicines in, and sometimes we'd forget it going places and it'd be really stressful that we didn't have it. And so it's things like that. So every time he goes out now, we're like, do you have your EpiPens? Do you have your like medicines and everything? But now he's really good. Now he knows what to do. But when we were growing up, it was a bit harder, I think.
Yeah, I can relate 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had experiences, where I've gone to weddings and then there's been nuts around and I've had to ask people to move the nuts out the way because I would react, and I've had reactions in the past.
Yeah.
I'm quite lucky now, I think, that a lot of our family friends know that I have allergies, and actually the weddings that I've been to, they've actually told the caterers I have allergies and they prepared specific food for me, so I've been very lucky in that sense. Have you had any experience with your brother going to weddings?
With weddings, it's quite difficult because like the caterers are external, so every time we go to a wedding, if we're at like a reception or something, then we'll always ask the waiter, can we just be like, just check, does this have nuts in? If something looks nutty, I don't know how to explain that, but sometimes you can tell if something looks a bit nutty, and sometimes I'll try it before he has it and be like, oh, I can taste a bit of like nuts in it, don't have that. Because the waiters don't always know, they don't always have allergen menu to hand, and it's just like you can't really rely off that. So we just don't ever take a risk, and we try and let people know, like, but it's really difficult because weddings are like everyone wants to hug and everything. So I think that's how he first got his reaction, was when he was really young, and my granddad was eating nuts and then just went to go like kiss him on the cheek, and I think that was enough to set him off, and I think that's how mom and dad started to realise he had a nut allergy. Cross-contamination like that, it's not even about just eating it yourself. It's literally if someone touches it and then they touch you.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I remember when my mom used to go to kind of friends' houses and they'd have nuts, and then I'd be in the back of the car hugging her, and then her breathing on me would cause my face to swell. So that's when they kind of started to realise that it's a bit more severe, and it's not just about eating, but it's everything. It's external, it's the smells, it's
in the air, when it's just in like circulating in the air. That's why planes are a problem. So many times when we've been on a plane and we've called them up beforehand and be like, look, we've got a child who's got a nut allergy, please can you not serve nuts on board? And then you get there and no one really knows anything, so you tell them again, and then they'll make an announcement saying we've got someone who's got a nut allergy, and you still see people who've bought nuts in duty free and they'll just open the packet and it's just like they don't understand. They're probably thinking, oh, we just sat here eating it ourselves, but in a plane obviously the air is circulating, so it can reach somebody that could be allergic. I think there needs to be some more rules on it. Someone needs to kind of
Regulate
it. Yeah, there's got to be something. The argument is, well, what happens if someone's allergic to, people can be allergic to anything, can't they? Like, where do you put a stop on it? But it's someone's life at the end of the day, and I don't think eating nuts is gonna like what's more important, eating some nuts on a flight or someone's life. It's just
I 100% agree with you. I guess in terms of holidays as well, what's it like going on holiday? As you said, we've talked a bit about travel.
Yeah.
What's your experience been like abroad? In the UK, I feel very safe in the UK compared to when I go abroad, because I obviously understand the language and I can read labels, but when I go abroad, it's a whole different story.
So with holidays, we're always really careful with where we go. I think we've always gone to resorty type places as well that are quite established. I always, before we go anywhere, I'll research the hotel that we're staying at, I'll research what food they do, contact the hotel, make sure that they know, like, if it's all inclusive or something, just make sure that they know. I always make like a sheet for my brother with translations on. Like when we've been to Mexico and Cuba, obviously they speak Spanish. I can speak a little bit, enough to get by and explain that my brother's got an allergy, so I'll say that, and that's enough for them to understand. But when we've been to other places, then I make like a little, almost like a crib sheet with translations on, so just that he can pull it out and be like, look, this is what the situation is. Holidays can be difficult. You just have to take extra precautions.
Yeah, 100%. Sure. I'm the same. I always make sure I have a sheet and I contact, the place if it is. I mean, to be honest, I've never even been to a resort.
Yeah.
I always go on holidays where I book the hotel and everything separately, so I've never really experienced a resort. That'd be amazing. I'd love to. That's on my bucket list, to go to a resort. But I imagine resorts are a bit better in terms of allergies because it's all inclusive, and it's you tell the staff once you've got an allergy, they kind of make sure.
Yeah, I think they're quite good like that, and also you get used to what food is safe. So he would just stick with what's safe, go with that, and not take a risk with anything else. That's the other good thing. And like a lot of the times the chef will come out and make sure that he's okay, and they reassure you, which I think is really important with allergy as well, just the reassurance that someone's taken it on board, they've listened to what you've said, and they're doing what they can to prevent you from getting a reaction.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess another thing is your mom's obviously an allergy nurse, or she worked in allergy for a very long time, didn't she? How was that experience growing up? And
So I think my mum wanted to become an allergy nurse because she wanted to learn more so she could protect her son, basically, and get the latest advice on it and what the in thing is with allergy. So she learned a lot about it, and she would tell us about it and make sure that we knew how to use an EpiPen and all of that. And I think sometimes it would probably annoy my brother a bit, because sometimes I think he just wanted to forget that he even had an allergy and just wanted to enjoy. But obviously, mum being a mum wants to make sure that he doesn't take any risks. But my mum actually got my brothers onto immunotherapy, and that's how she knew about it through her work, and my brothers were eligible to go and have immunotherapy, so that's helped them with hay fever and things.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
So that was like I can't remember how many years, like 3 or 4 years, and they give you a bit of the antigen, and it helps your body to get used to it, so your symptoms are less.
I remember actually I went to a hospital and did a bit of work experience when I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I think I was about 16 at the time, or 17. And I remember going into a hospital room where a nurse was giving immunotherapy.
Yeah.
And they were saying, I think at the time, I mean, I'm not sure now, but at the time it was dust mite and hay fever and things like that they were mostly doing immunotherapy for. I mean, I think I've read a few of the research now, and there's trials being done with peanut, but it doesn't completely eliminate allergies. It might reduce the severity in some cases, but with adults, the tolerance isn't as good. Not sure exactly. I haven't read a lot of the research around it, but that's as much as my knowledge goes in terms of immunotherapy. But that's really interesting. I didn't know your brothers went through immunotherapy. How's their hay fever now? Do they still...
It's so much better. Like, they used to have very bad hay fever. So I've got 2 older brothers. The eldest has like all the allergies. The middle brother, he's got hay fever pretty bad. But after having the immunotherapy, it's so much better. I mean, they used to be wiped out in spring and summer. And when we had exams and stuff, they would really suffer, like, so badly. I'd feel so bad for them. But it's a lot better now. They can actually enjoy a little bit more. They still get it, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was. And they used, like, my eldest brother, I'm sure he used to have, because his nose was so inflamed, it used to bleed. Like, he'd get, like, nosebleeds from it. It was really, like, bad.
Wow,
but,
I did not know that at all.
Yeah, I think he was just completely, like, bunged up. I think with exams, it was probably the stress as well wasn't helping in summer and spring. But yeah, it's a lot better now. And when we go on holiday, it completely clears up. I don't know what happens. I guess, like, by the beach and sea, there's not as much pollen. So
yeah. Also, on holiday, there's a different species of pollen.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. So like, for example, I'm allergic to birch pollen. You go on holiday, you don't have silver birch pollen. So okay, so let's move on now a little bit about you, Sonia. Let's talk about you and your lactose intolerance. Did your mum have a part to play in, you finding out? You said you were diagnosed when you were 10, right?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, to be honest, I don't think my mum really knew. When we were younger, my mum would always give us, like, a glass of milk at night, just, growing. And I used to get a bit of a stomachache with it, but it wasn't enough for me to feel like there was anything else. I just got a bit of a stomachache with it. And I knew growing up, when I was at school, when they used to offer you, like, water or milk, I'd always go for water because I just knew milk, something didn't quite suit me. And then it was just one time when I was, I think 9 or 10, I must have been probably like 9 or something. We went to a wedding and the next morning I was sick, I like vomited. And then after that I became really sensitive to milk and to dairy stuff. And any time that I'd have it, I'd get, like, I call it bubbly in my stomach. It's basically gas. And it would make me feel really uncomfortable, quite sick. Yeah, it was just strange. I don't think my lactose intolerance is really bad. I think some people really can't have any, but I can tolerate enough. Sometimes I'll have a pizza and just suffer a bit later, whereas some people will throw up. So mine's not as bad, but can be annoying at times. Like, I'll never drink just pure milk or yogurt. There's stuff that I have just cut from my diet because I'm like, I can't really have it. And growing up as well, there wasn't many options for me. That was one of the worst things.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, I guess now that, with veganism increasing, there's a lot more variety, like things like coconut milk, and even, like, I saw you today having lactose-free milk.
When I was 10, I think there was only milk on the market. I only remember seeing lactose-free milk, and it was still cow's milk, but they put the lactase enzyme in it. I went through so many different types of milk to try and find one that suited me. Like, I didn't really like coconut milk, I didn't like soya milk, I just didn't really like them. Couldn't have almond milk because my brother can't have nuts, so it was difficult, and I cut out so much when I was younger. There was only just that lactose-free milk with the lactase enzyme in it. That was the only one that I liked, and that's the one I've stuck with. But then as the years, like you said, with veganism and everything, there's loads now. Like, there's whole sections of free from, and I can indulge a bit more. Like, even I remember when lactose-free cheese came out, and I was like, oh my god, I can have cheese again, and I can have all of those kind of things, like cheese on my pasta, like all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And chocolate even. I mean, I still eat normal chocolate, but if I there's an option for lactose-free chocolate, so
yeah, it's so much better, so much better. Yeah, but the problem is, I think it's pricier than the normal cheese and normal milk, isn't it?
Yeah, it is more expensive, but then if you're willing to pay, like, I want those things in my life, so I just pay for them. I think it is a bit unfair, but I don't know. I mean, it's like paying for glasses, isn't it? It's not my fault, but you just have to pay.
Yeah, it is unfair.
Yeah.
A food intolerance is a non-immune mediated adverse reaction to food. This means that it does not involve your immune system, so there is no allergic reaction, and it is never life-threatening. Instead, food intolerances can often involve the digestive system. Essentially, the food intolerance is a difficulty digesting certain foods, which results in unpleasant physical symptoms and reactions such as things like bloating and tummy pains, wind, diarrhea, sugar can sometimes also affect things like skin, such as creating rashes and itching, and even I've heard joint pains. Reactions are often delayed as well, so that's important, occurring several hours and sometimes up to several days even after eating the food. And there are many different possible symptoms that could be caused by the intolerance, depending on as well the food that you're intolerant to. So depending on the food that's kind of suspected, depends on the possible symptoms. Some common intolerances include things like lactose intolerance, gluten intolerance, and adverse reactions to things like food additives and chemicals or contaminants such as histamine, alcohol, caffeine. Can you tell me a little bit about your symptoms? You said you have kind of bubbling in your stomach. Do you get other types of symptoms as well?
Pretty much the ones you've mentioned, like the bubbling, that would happen pretty much immediately after having something, or maybe like half an hour later. It depends on what I've had and how rich it is. That's what I've found with mine. But yeah, I'll get like the bubbling, bloating, feeling sick, diarrhea, unfortunately. It does kind of wipe you out a bit. I remember when I first got diagnosed with it and I spoke with the dietitian, she sort of told me, like, avoid this. But she said, if you do feel like you want some chocolate or ice cream, then you can say, okay, I'll have it, but then I'm going to have to suffer afterwards. And that kind of stuck with me, because then it made me weigh it up in my mind. Like, if I want to have something rich, really chocolatey, then if I'm at home, then okay, it's okay, I can just sit around and not really worry, let my symptoms pass, it will happen. But if I'm out and about, then I'll think twice about it before having it. So it depends on how rich it is, where I am, and how likely I am to get symptoms from that food that I'm about to eat.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So essentially, lactose intolerance affects people who cannot produce enough of the enzyme called lactase, which is used by our body to digest and break down lactose, a type of sugar mainly found in milk and dairy products. People with lactose intolerance do not produce enough of the enzyme lactase. So lactose stays in the digestive system where it is fermented by bacteria. This leads to the production of various gases. As you mentioned, you get quite gassy and quite bloated, which causes symptoms associated with lactose intolerance. So it depends on the underlying reason as well as why your body's not producing enough lactase. And food intolerances can also sometimes take quite a long time to diagnose. So you actually said that you talked to a dietitian. I'd really love to kind of find out a little bit more. But I think one thing to mention is please don't go buying the tests online. There's a lot of fake tests online that aren't scientifically accurate. And definitely not recommended by the British Dietary Association. So if you do suspect you have a food intolerance, then talk to your GP or your healthcare provider about that. I'd really love kind of to know a little bit about how you got diagnosed and your experience talking to a dietitian and a GP.
Yeah, so like I said, when I first felt like something wasn't quite right, we went to the doctor. They said I think they referred us, they probably did do blood tests as well just to see if there's anything going on, but I think that was all fine. They referred me to the Children's Hospital where I did I think it was called like a breath test or something, but they basically, what it was a big cup of water and lactose, and they made you drink it all, and then every half an hour for 3 hours, they'd make you blow on this little machine thing. And it was basically measuring the amount of, I can't remember exactly, but it was measuring something that you release or you don't release when you digest lactose. So I think it's testing for the presence of the enzyme. So my result came up positive, so I was lactose intolerant, so that's when it first got diagnosed. And from there we got referred to the dietitian to speak to me about how to manage it, what foods I can and can't eat. I just remember her giving me like a leaflet of things of how I can substitute dairy, because obviously growing up, like, dairy is really important. So it was stuff like obviously lactose-free alternatives, but other foods containing calcium, things like cheese. I remember her saying that mature cheese contained less lactose, so if you want to go for that one, you can go for that one. But the dietitian was really good because, especially at that time when there wasn't many options, they kind of reassured you that you can have certain things. You just need to you just need to know how to handle it. And obviously now it's not really a problem with so many options out there. So yeah.
I guess one thing I wanted to ask is, did you have to take calcium tablets or vitamin D or anything like that?
I don't take any supplements or anything. No, and I don't remember her mentioning supplements, calcium supplements or anything like that. All in all, I guess my diet is quite balanced in terms of I have meat and veg and whatever. So I don't think I wasn't too restricted, and because my lactose intolerance isn't too bad, I still had dairy in my diet. I probably shouldn't have, but I do sometimes, so I don't completely cut it out. But I guess if you were more strict with it, then you might need something.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's something that I was thinking about. But I guess, yeah, she probably gave you a list of foods that contained calcium, as you said, and various other vitamins and things, so you didn't feel left out, I guess. And grew up to be the person you are now. You grew. So I remember during my genetics degree learning about this kind of trait. Generally speaking, mammals can't digest milk, so a lot of mammals actually can't digest milk in adult life. For example, cats and dogs. You're not really meant to give cats milk, even though I used to see it on cartoons all the time when I was little. You're not meant to. Yeah. Adult cats. Because they don't have the lactase enzyme to digest milk. In humans, the ability to digest milk, lactose, is confirmed by an enzyme called beta-galactosidase, called LPH for short. I'm not going to try and pronounce the full name because it's a bit long and I don't know if I'll end up saying it right, but LPH. And in some humans, I think it's around roughly 2/3 of the world's population is actually lactose intolerant. I don't know if you knew that, but...
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so about 2/3 of the world's population is lactose intolerant. And the level of this enzyme actually declines after weaning. So, once a baby has kind of stopped weaning, then the level of enzyme naturally reduces. However, for many other people, including a large fraction of the European population and various other kind of populations who domesticated cows, lactase persisted and they didn't have kind of this reduction in this enzyme. So the ability to break down lactose persisted because of a mutation in the lactase gene, and the lactase gene is called LCT. And it enables digestion of lactose throughout an individual's lifetime. These individuals can maintain much higher levels of LPH, which can be lifelong, so they can digest milk throughout their entire adulthood. This trait is known as lactose persistence and is particularly common in some populations in the past 10,000 years who traditionally practiced cattle domestication, so for example dairy farming. So stated previously, many of these people are from Central or Northern Europe. In the UK, for example, lactose intolerance is more common in people of Asian descent or African Caribbean descent, and I guess you kind of understand that now once you understand the genetics behind it. So both these lactose phenotypes in humans have very kind of complex genetic basis and have been widely investigated, especially in the last few decades. And I remember, as I said, learning about this in genetics when I studied genetics at uni, and I found it really, really interesting. Essentially, scientific evidence suggests that humans were once lactose intolerant and that lactase persistence evolved after people domesticated animals and began drinking their milk, and it's most likely linked to very strong selection pressures for this kind of gene and to really persist. I'll add a few articles if anyone's interested in this topic, finding out more, because for me, I just found that really, really fascinating. I don't know, did you learn about that in your pharmacy degree at all?
Not really. I remember learning about it at school a little bit.
No, that makes sense.
I think just in general, I feel like allergies and intolerances, I feel like the people who have those conditions understand it, and we make an effort to, educate ourselves because we have to. But I think the wider population need to know a bit more about it and how they can help, and just basic knowledge. It doesn't have to be a lot, but I think if someone says they've got an allergy, then that person or their friend or whoever it is should just be aware of it and have their back and make sure that they're safe. It goes same for when restaurants and places like that where they're serving food. I think they just need to be more aware.
Yeah.
And reach a point where it's not actually a burden. It just becomes a normal thing that we deal with.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, and I think that's what's so nice about having you as a friend as well, is because you know so much about allergies, and you're always like, oh yeah, make sure you've got your EpiPen, make sure you've got your medicine.
It's drilled into me, so I can't not. I have to say it.
But it's it's really nice because I really appreciate it, and you've always got my back in restaurants and things, and you understand the severity of them, and I don't feel embarrassed or anything when I'm around you, or if I'm reading the label about 100 times, you understand. So it's really nice. So Sonia, one thing I did want to ask is, has your brother ever had a reaction, and how have you dealt with that?
So yeah, I remember seeing him have a reaction one time. We went to a restaurant, this was probably like over 10 years ago, and it was the one day he forgot his EpiPen kit, and I can't remember, it was an occasion that we were at this restaurant, and so we couldn't really go back and get it type thing. And so we made sure the waiters knew, got a person with a nut allergy, please no nuts in any of the food. We just said that just don't put nuts in anyone's food. And so, yeah, so I think we ordered like a platter or something, and they brought the platter out and they said, oh, that piece has got nuts in. And we were like, okay, right. So my brother, I think, I don't know if he had, I can't remember if he had a bit of meat from another piece on that platter, or if somebody else did and then they touched him or something like that. But basically what happened, I guess, was the juices had mixed in the platter and stuff. So I remember just kind of seeing him, he sort of went a bit quiet and a bit like, yeah, he just went a bit quiet, and we were asking him, are you okay? And he just said, like, he thinks he's having a reaction, basically, because his lips were starting to swell and he was starting to feel funny. And that's when we started to, like, panic, especially because we didn't have his EpiPen kit. So we called 999 and got them to come. Luckily, he was fine, but you could see that he was starting to, like, get something, which wasn't very good at all. That was really scary, actually. And I think since then, that restaurant that we went past them one more time, and they'd put up a thing saying, like, we cannot guarantee, you know, like, no nuts or anything, and they've only done that since, and it's just like, we told them no nuts, we told them don't put anything in, and they still did it. So yeah,
oh my gosh,
it's a weird one, but it just goes to show, like, if people don't cooperate with you, then things can happen. So, but it was partly our fault for forgetting the kit, but then it's partly the restaurant as well.
But yes, thank you so much, Sonia, for coming on this podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I hope it's helped.
No, it's been really, really nice to talk to you, and I didn't actually know a lot of the things that we chatted about. No, so it's been really, really interesting, actually. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, me too.
And that's a wrap, guys. So thank you so much for listening. Please do leave a review and share this podcast with friends and family. You can also follow me on social media, which will be provided in the show notes, as well as everything that was discussed today, with citations if appropriate, of course. Now, until next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye now. Now, just a disclaimer that the information in this podcast is for information purposes only and is not intended to be used as medical advice. I am not a medical doctor, so I have never and will never give medical advice. You should always speak to a healthcare provider about your unique health needs. My opinions are entirely my own and do not reflect the organisation's opinions that I work for. Due to the nature of my work, I can sometimes have access to unpublished literature. However, due to confidentiality, I will strictly not be discussing unpublished literature. I only discuss findings from published literature in this podcast. I am not responsible for any claims related to procedures, professionals, products, or methods discussed in this podcast, and I do not approve or endorse any products, professionals, services, or methods that may be discussed in this podcast. This podcast was written and produced by me, Ayawafi. Music was also produced by me, Ayawafi, using GarageBand.